Vice Chair of the European Movement. She was for many years a member of the European Parliament for the Green Party. With us today, Molly's going to be talking to us about the bonfire of EU regulations. I'll hand over to you, Molly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for being here today. It's really appreciated. So I was a member of the European Parliament. I was responsible for a lot of the laws that have protected the environment in this country. Clean air, clean water, pesticides, a massive range of environmental protections. And the so-called retained EU law bill has been put there to trash that legislation. Now, you won't be surprised that as somebody who put a great deal of time and effort into writing those laws, I can tell you should be strongly opposing this process. I'm going to explain a little bit about the technicalities of how it works, hopefully not too dull, but actually quite important. And then we'll have, I'm supported by these lovely green spirits, and then we'll have some role play that'll be much more fun, but basically making the same point through the medium of drama. So you have probably noticed that we're living in a country that's appallingly badly governed at the moment. And to me, the absolutely worst thing about what's going on is that we're being driven by ideology, not by policy. Nobody's sitting down and thinking through what people in this country want, or even what will be in the best interests of this country. They're driven by a completely mad right-wing ideology. I thought we were going to stop at Tufton Street, actually, and do something really loud over there. But I'm sure somebody else is doing that. Because you know that those people drove the decision to leave the European Union. They did that because they don't want to tackle the climate crisis. They want to oppose the net zero legislation. They want to have what they call deregulation. When I was introduced, somebody said that was regulation. I think it's really important that we actually say it's about laws. It's about laws that people elected by you pass to protect you and your environment. And that's what they're trashing. The most dangerous thing that they're doing is to introduce this sunset clause, which means that all the laws that we brought across from the European Union are going to disappear at the end of this year. We're talking about potentially 570 pieces of legislation. I mean, when I was in the European Parliament, I would say I put a great deal of time into maybe 10. You know, that's the amount of time it takes over my 6 years. It takes an enormously long time to just debate, negotiate and agree the details of complex legislation. And they're talking of getting rid of 570 bits by the end of this year. It's totally apparent that they don't have time to do a proper job there. And so and also, what about bits of law that they accidentally didn't notice, you know, that fell down the back of the filing cabinet or something? Laws that might be protecting really important parts of our environment. Let's say a law prohibiting a toxic pesticide. Things can easily get missed. It's an extremely dangerous way to deal with important laws, and it's completely unprecedented. Nobody would be mad enough to do this except this government we've got at the moment. Some of the critical things we're dealing with are conservation of habitats and species regulations, passed in 2017, marine strategy regulations dating back to 2010. I mean, that's just two examples. There are hundreds of bits of law. A lot of them are really important. Incidentally, the pressure for this is not coming from industry. My experience of working as an MEP was that industry, okay, they fought the legislation when it was going through, but they are now prepared to accept it. They don't want two different levels of law, and they don't want this deregulation to happen. And partly why they don't want it to happen is that if we do change our laws and move away from EU law, there will be retaliation from the EU side, and it will get harder for them to do business. So you won't be surprised to have me standing here saying that EU law is better than UK law. I mean, the most important reason I think that's the case is that UK law is made by governments. EU law is made by all the parties. Everybody from all the different parties gets in a room and brings the best together to make good law. In this country, policy is driven by two parties, one of whom is in government, one of them, then the next lot come into government, and they're constantly working in the interests of people who elect them, narrow vested interests. That's not the best way to make law. I worked on the Economics and Monetary Affairs Committee, and the financial legislation that we worked on, first of all, was to stop us getting into the sort of financial catastrophe we got into in 2007-8. Right now, the government is threatening to unpick that protective legislation so that you'll have to give billions more of your money to the banks. And secondly, I worked on the Agriculture Committee, so I worked on lots of bits of legislation that protected our environment. For example, the ban on GM. That's something that the Tufton Street mob are wanting to get rid of for years, ever since it was brought in. the limitation of antibiotics on farms, which are massively overused on factory farms, meaning that actually it's appalling conditions on the farms, but also those antibiotics develop resistance, the bacteria develop resistance, and the medicine as we know it will cease to exist unless we get a grip on antibiotic overuse. I worked on that legislation myself. We fought very hard to get something more like the Scandinavian model to protect antibiotics so that you can have a hip operation, or any sort of operation would have been dangerous before we had those effective antibiotics. That's something else that's at risk. I can see various people with turds on their heads here, so I don't need to mention the Water Framework Directive. I'm not sure I'd wear a turd on my head, but I very much enjoy that. And I really like the use of that Anglo-Saxon word, which is an excellent word to describe what's happening. You know, we were the dirty man of Europe before we went into the EU, and we're going straight back there when we come out. And what that tells you is that the EU has not only protected our financial system, made us stronger in the world, but it's also protected our environment. That's why I'm now working with the European movement to take us back into the European Union. I've got some leaflets I'm going to hand out when the drama's going on, so please join us. We need as many members as possible. Most people in this country know that we've made an absolutely appalling mistake, but it's quite embarrassing to own up to that. We have to find a way back that allows people to climb down from that position that they were bamboozled into with lies. Without question, we need to find a way for those people to change their minds and to establish a clear majority to rejoin so that the European Union can welcome us back. We've been running a campaign against the retained EU law bill for the past year, and that's what will be on the leaflets that I'm going to hand out. But we've also got Green Lords, and lots of Lords actually. I'm saying Green Lords because I'm a Green, but most of the Lords, they're experts in law, not like the sort of ideologues in the House of Commons, and they recognise what a dangerous process this is. They've been working really hard to block it, and I think, personally, I'm quite optimistic. We've got to keep the pressure up, but I'm quite optimistic that this mad, dangerous process and bill will be chucked out. So, so I just wanted to say in closing, Brexit's not done. This bill proves that Brexit's not done. Yeah. Brexit is so hard to do that all they can do is essentially set fire to everything to try and make it happen. When they said in 2019 that Brexit was done, it was just another lie. It's ongoing and it's very damaging. But we can reverse it. So please join the European movement or do whatever you need to do to get us back into the European Union. That's the best way to save this law and to protect our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Big round of applause for Molly. Thank you very much, Molly. That's brilliant. Passionate, based on fact, just what we need.